Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodity sector. My name is Jesse Day, and on this episode, I'm joined by Martin Armstrong, an economic forecaster and creator of the Socrates AI program that predicted the 1987 crash, the Nikkei's collapse in 1989, and Russia's financial collapse in 1998. He is also the founder of Armstrong Economics. We're going to discuss his predictions for Trump's presidency, the political turmoil that Canada is now in after Trudeau stepped down, his thoughts on the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and the current state of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and so much more. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation with Martin Armstrong. Martin Armstrong, great to have you back on the show. You are 2024's Commodity Culture Guest of the Year with over 500,000 views on the channel. So the people really enjoy hearing from you. And I want to start today's conversation with Trump's presidency because you predicted that Trump would get the victory. And now that it's happened and he's days away from being sworn in, I wonder what your outlook is for a Trump presidency here in 2025.
Well, I mean, it's certainly going to be a rough road. It's not. Politics is really collapsing, honestly. And if you look at basically his first term, whatever he did when Biden got in, we just have to reverse it, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Trying to sell off the material for the wall before he gets in. I mean, so what? You just want to let everybody in the country, and that's what they don't even think about things. It's just, if he did something, I have to reverse it. And that's the problem with politics. We've gotten to the point where it's no longer about the people or the country or anything else. And it's just whatever, the opposition does, we must oppose. You say the sky's blue. No, it's not. It's red. It's, I don't know. I mean, this is what's happening all over. You just see the polarization has taken place virtually everywhere you look. And this does not speak well for the future going forward. I think that the people are going to end up rising up, over the next basically 8 years or so, and for different reasons, but pretty much everywhere. That, I mean, just take, for example, the propaganda that we live in a democracy. We don't even, we're supposed to, first of all, it's not a democracy. It's supposed to be a republic. But here you have Biden outlawing, gas heaters, water heaters for homes on his last day out. All right. In a republic, that laws are supposed to be made by the people. It's supposed to go to Congress. Congress is supposed to do this. What he's doing, and not just him, but other presidents have done it as well. These executive orders. It's a dictatorship. The people have no say in any of this stuff. And I think that's what the big issue becomes. Like, shall we go to war with Russia, or yes or no? Nobody asks us that question. They just do it themselves. And then if you don't show up, you go to jail, you're a traitor, you're this, that, whatever. I think it's, people are going to start waking up over the next 8 years and realizing this is not the form of government that we want. It is only for them. It's not for us. They do whatever they want. Like NATO, honestly, is like the threat to world peace. You have to understand how governments operate. If there's world peace, you don't need NATO. So they have to oppose it. Otherwise, they're out of business. All right. Every agency does that. Back in the 80s, I argued that, we have two regulatory bodies, one for futures, one for equities, SEC and the CFTC. So they should be merged together. You can't have a combined fund in the United States. And that's what hedge funds became, because you had to go offshore to do it. And the answer was, no, we can't do that because we'd have to lay off 50,000 people. So it's never about what's right or wrong. It's about, these people got jobs. That's it. I mean, I've seen memos from NATO. What they were getting very concerned that all this money was going to climate change, not to them. And they were actually discussing, how do we remain relevant? Look, you're there in Serbia. I mean, the Russians don't want to come in and take all of Europe. I mean, that's absurd. Any more than the Europeans want to go occupy Russia or China or whatever. These things are always done by the elites, not by the people per se. All right, but to keep the politicians sending the money, NATO has to say, "Oh, if Ukraine falls, they're going to come take everything else." The main reason Putin was very popular when Yeltsin handed it to him is because, one, he wasn't a communist, and two, he wasn't an oligarch. The Russian people did not want to go back to communism. I don't think any more than you guys did over there, So, I mean, most of this stuff is Cold War propaganda. All right, fine, Khrushchev. The communist days were different. They believed it was almost like an economic religion. And capitalism was evil, and we have to conquer the world to save the world, that kind of nonsense. That's when Khrushchev said, "We will bury you," Those days are long gone. Those theories, ideas, empire building, that was mainly because of what we call the physiocrats out of France. And it turned on what is wealth. To them, they decided that wealth was agriculture, and that somebody that makes a saddle or whatever for a horse for them, he's a parasite. He was living off of them. He didn't create wealth. Only agriculture created wealth. So that philosophy led to empire building. The richer your empire is, the more land you need, right? I mean, those things are all, 18th century dead ideas. I mean, after World War II, the two countries that rose up the most were Germany and Japan. Neither one had gold reserves, and neither one had a whole bunch of land for agriculture. The wealth of a nation is the productivity of its people. You can have the biggest gold reserves in the world, but if you don't have people that know how to dig them, what good are they? So it's the productivity of the people that creates the wealth of a nation. And we have to really look at a lot of these ideas. And where I disagree with Trump, and I think he is stuck back in this 18th century stuff with tariffs. And, he has somebody advising him and says, okay, fine. Before there was an income tax, the country survived basically on tariffs. True. Okay. But we also didn't have all this Marxist socialism stuff. So you didn't have Social Security, you didn't have all these things. So you weren't funding, a massive government. It was a small government at that point in time. And it was more like the old Athenian thing. Women didn't need the right to vote because they weren't doing anything that they could do to women. It was more or less like, shall we go to war with Greece or this or that? That was it. Okay. Once you started getting into all this socialism stuff, where they are directly going after you, then yes, everybody needs the right to vote. All right. And so that's what really kind of shifted things a lot. Once we adopted this socialistic agenda, I'm here to protect you. So I'm going to pass this law. Well, you have a right to say yes or no to that law. Regardless of what it is, one way or the other. But, and that's where the founding fathers of the United States in the Constitution, they outlawed direct taxation, which is income taxes. Why? Mainly because once you get into that area, then you are accountable to the government. What did you do? How much did you make? Where did it come from? As opposed to an indirect tax, like a sales tax. You go to a store, you buy something, okay, there's a tax and you left. They didn't know if you bought it or somebody else. Today, they want digital currencies, know what you're buying, it's going crazy. They have to know absolutely everything. I mean, what's coming? A DNA basically on your digital ID so that they know who you are. But even all that, they know. Look, they have taken their lessons from history. Most of this digital ID stuff is to restrict movement. Why? Open your history books and look at the revolutions of 1848. What happened to start down in Sicily, and it was more or less a movement against monarchy, etc. in Europe, communism. And so you had agitators moving from one country to the next. So digital IDs and restricting movement, that's what they're afraid of. Everybody gets together. Okay, we're going to overthrow France. Okay, now we'll go to Germany. Now we'll go over here. They want to restrict movement. That's what this has always been about. Yeah. So they're very, very concerned about that. And they put it on every other which way from Sunday. It's as you know, I've dealt with governments for a long time, and they're all the same. Doesn't matter. I've been called in from Asia to Middle East to Europe and America. I don't see any difference. It's once a government gets power, they will do everything to retain that power. As you guys know, you can vote your way into communism, but you got to shoot your way out.
Hey guys, just a quick break to hear from today's sponsor, ARC Silver Gold Osmium. They offer personalized service and competitive prices with no minimum purchase for silver, gold, platinum, or osmium. Here's just some of the comments left on this YouTube channel about ARC SGO and owner Ian Everard. Have bought from ARC, good source and price. I cannot say enough good about Ian and his company. He is the most honest individual I could find in order to buy precious metals. If you are looking to buy precious metals, I recommend Ian at ARC Silver. He is a straight shooter. So go to arcsgo.com and contact Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you.
Yeah,
That's a very succinct way of putting it. I do wonder if you have any opinions on what's going on in Canada in the political situation, if you're following that at all, because you mentioned socialism. I think there is no greater poster child for a push towards socialism than the Canadian Liberal Party. Now Trudeau has announced he's going to step down. How do you think things are going to work out there? Obviously, we have the Conservative Party. Pierre Poilievre was considered a shoo-in, but now Trudeau has stepped down. They could stick somebody else in there, a Mark Carney, a somebody else, clean him up, put him in a nice suit, have him say all the right things, because Canada is a very left-leaning country. So I feel like Pierre's chances have now become worse. What are your thoughts? Are you watching the political situation in Canada right now?
Yeah, I mean, problem Canada has a parliamentary system, which is actually far worse than the American system. The reason
I agree.
Is what Trudeau has done is actually pulled a very clever maneuver. Yes, he resigned, okay, but he also shut down Parliament. Why? Okay. He has the right to shut down the Parliament because the King used to have the right to call Parliament or not. Historically, the King of England did not have the power to raise taxes unilaterally. To raise taxes, he had to call a parliament together and the people had to consent. All right. And it was like, because there's usually some war or something like that. Again, there was no socialistic type thing. So that power exists in a parliamentary system. Trudeau shut down Parliament and will not reconvene until, I think, March 24th. Why? All right. Because if he did not do that, they would have moved for a no confidence vote. By doing so, the Conservatives could have won. All right. By shutting down Parliament, there's no confidence vote. He's just stepping down from the head of the Liberal Party, and as you're saying, they can stick in whoever they want. It's actually to defeat democracy. And the leftist liberals in Canada are basically destroying the country. They really are. I have a lot of friends in Canada, and a lot of them are basically waking up to the idea that the country is just going to split. And it's, there's always been this tension, really since it started in 1791 between the English and the French, Quebec has had referendums. 1837, they actually fielded an army to separate from Canada. So these ancient resentments are still there. And I think you're going to see Canada split. I don't think there's any choice about it. The Liberals are just trying to force this woke agenda, shutting down fossil fuels, things of this nature. That's basically putting the bulk of the people unemployed in Alberta. It's like when Biden came into office, the first thing, day one, he opens up the border, and then two, he shuts down the pipeline from Canada. There's no empirical evidence whatsoever that fossil fuels has changed the climate. The climate has always had cycles, warming periods, ice ages, back and forth for millions of years. That's part of the way it operates. When Mount St. Helens blew up in the late 80s, it threw so much ash into the air, it was the equivalent of basically 10 years of pollution from cars. You had Mount Tambora blow up. And they called it, here's a book, you can read it, it's called The Year Without a Summer. Throw so much ash up in the air, it was snowing in New York City in July. Same thing throughout, the Byzantine Empire. Historians are saying you couldn't see the sun for months. Some huge volcano blew up, and it creates, volcanic winter. These are, you can't mess with this kind of stuff. And it's a lot of the people just do not understand what they're even talking about. You had some millennials go to the Louvre and throw tomato soup on the Mona Lisa. Oh, it's an oil painting. I'm sorry, honey, it's not crude oil. It's linseed oil, it's like, the stupidity of humanity is infinite. I'll say that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I want to get your thoughts on Mark Zuckerberg coming out recently and in an apparent, what seems like a step forward for free speech, now saying that Facebook and Instagram, the Meta platforms, are no longer going to rely on fact checkers. They're going to move towards more of a system like X, community notes. They're going to scale back the censorship. Are his actions really going to make a difference here? Is he just aligning himself with the political winds? What's this all about?
Well, I think he is definitely shifting direction with the political winds. That's for sure. Look, they went completely crazy, and unfortunately, this is what they're doing also with the digital currencies. The U.S. Constitution, you read the First Amendment, it says the government shall not. Okay. Doesn't say anything about Facebook, YouTube, or whatever. All right. And then you had the Biden administration. Look, I can't silence this guy, but you can. We have a favor. All right. So then you really, that's unconstitutional criminal activity. Zuckerberg and the rest of them, they fell into it. Oh, okay, fine. Government tells me to do this. I got to be a good boy and jump as high as they tell me. I think he realizes now that that whole agenda has been really rejected by the bulk of the people, not just Trump and MAGA or whatever. I know a bunch of Democrats that maybe are not necessarily Trump fans, but even they are against what's going on here. I think he is shifting with the winds. And if he didn't do so, honestly, if I was Trump, I would be going after his ass pretty damn hard. Because it's just, you're betraying everything a free society is supposed to stand for. Go to China if you want to do that. This is not the way the West is supposed to be.
Now, I wonder if you have any thoughts on the fall of Assad's regime in Syria. This is a very interesting geopolitical event that took place. It seemed to happen all of a sudden, much easier than most people believed that it would be possible. How do you see that situation, and particularly in relation to Russia? Now Assad sought asylum. He is in Moscow at the moment, I believe. Russia had some military presence there. How does this affect Russia? How does that whole situation what does it mean to the geopolitical landscape at present?
Well, what's been off pretty much everybody's radar is, they're looking at Iran and Israel, etc. And some were looking at Assad. What they overlooked was Turkey. Um, and Erdogan has for years talked about resurrecting the Ottoman Empire. Um, the fall of Assad did not come from Israel. It really came basically from Turkey. He funded everything. He's now offered to train the military, etc. He believes in resurrecting the Ottoman Empire. He's made so many public statements about it. All right. And that's, you have to realize that, all right, when you had the Hamas attack on Israel, he came out at that time and praised the attack. And everybody was kind of shocked. You're a NATO country. How can he was started at that point in time trying to raise himself as the leader of the Arab world. This is the Ottoman Empire stuff. All right. And a lot of people do not really know the history so much of that region. But actually, the Palestinians were to be given Jordan. All right. And if you look at look at what actually happened there, the king of Jordan married a Palestinian to try and calm the waters there. All right. There was an Arabian War. All right. And the Saudis won. So we call it Saudi Arabia. The losers ended up in Jordan. All right. So Israel was part of the Ottoman Empire. So all this is very interconnected. You're probably going to see the fall eventually of Jordan and Lebanon. And this is, again, to gain more power for Turkey. But he's definitely on a mission. And it's, we used to be great in the old days and let's bring it back, sort of thing. I don't really know what the thinking is, but it's something always along those lines. They've tried to accuse Putin of that. He wants to resurrect the USSR. He does not. I mean, the people wouldn't allow him to do it anyhow. But what he said was also, which they overlook, he called Lenin a Bolshevik. They were even questioning whether he would remove Lenin's tomb. He said they were never, people really for Russia. And you have all these Ukrainians that blame Russia for everything. And it was the right-hand man of Stalin who took all the food from Ukraine. He was a Ukrainian. All right. Stalin wasn't Russia. He was from Georgia. A lot of Russian scholars have long debated, like, who's really a Russian? But so this whole area, as you know, is very, very convoluted and connecting back and forth for centuries.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue into the Russia-Ukraine conflict at present. It's kind of gotten out of the mainstream news cycle, at least recently. The consensus seems to be from a lot of people out there that Ukraine has no chance. Russia is eventually going to achieve total victory. Obviously, we hear those cries, like you mentioned, coming from the Western media, from the EU, that this is the beginning. Putin's going to move on Poland. Putin's going to move on all of Europe. He wants to take over. How do we separate fact from fiction here? Is Russia going to achieve total victory in your view? And how long will it take them? If you believe that to be the case.
I mean, this is more or less like, Cuba trying to invade, United States, So, I mean, let's get real here. What Zelensky, I can tell you, I've spoken to a lot of Ukrainians, and I put on a post. I said, if he's assassinated, trust me, it's not going to be a Russian, it's going to be a Ukrainian. They feel that he's been a real traitor to their country, mainly because there was a peace deal that Putin had agreed to, and Zelensky was agreeing to it. And then Boris Johnson hopped on the plane and said, no, you're not allowed to have peace. We want war. That made the front page news in Ukraine. And then the people began to turn against Zelensky. And waking up to the point that they're not in charge of their own country, that they can't seek peace if they want peace without permission from Washington and Brussels. And, one Ukrainian told me that if Zelensky was on fire, he wouldn't urinate on him until he was dead. He suspended elections, so he's a dictator. This is, and we're fighting for democracy. Come on. The West has wanted this war. There was the Minsk agreement, which was simply to allow the Donbass to have elections and vote on separating, as took place there, as you know, in Yugoslavia when it broke up. It broke up according to ethnic lines. All right. That was the solution for Ukraine as well. And I mean, the Donbass is basically mostly Russians, and they've been there for hundreds of years. And so this whole thing has been, Putin's been very restrained and very, I think, smart now, in the sense that I think he realizes that this whole thing was a setup. And, you had Merkel come out and said, well, we agreed to the Minsk agreement, but we never really intended to honor it. I mean, I can't believe a head of state would even say such a thing. But so I think he now realizes that this was all, to get him to come in. And you can look online, you'll see the day before, Zelensky even said, we're going to look at rearming nuclear. You had Camilla at the Munich conference 3 days before. Oh, Ukraine should join NATO. They were doing absolutely everything. The Washington Post interviewed Zelensky and said, you knew when Russia was coming in. Why did you not warn your people? In the Washington Post, he said, oh, if I told them, it would have cost me $7.5 billion. This is the leader of a country? He takes his orders from NATO and the U.S. That's it. They've been desperate to try and get Putin to attack anything in NATO so they could say he's the aggressor. So here you have Biden after, Trump is elected in the last few weeks. Oh, okay, fine. You can use long-range missiles, destroy Moscow if you want. This is supposed to be for peace. What this is about, and this is the danger here, that yes, they are using these long-range missiles to destroy the conventional capability of Russia. Why? So NATO can invade, basically. That's what this is all about. And the flip side of this, you eliminate the conventional capability of Russia, then you're down to just nuclear. If I'm Putin, I'm sitting there, you've wiped out everything that I had there, and now you're coming into my country, I'm pushing the button. Simple as that.
Do you think it could escalate to that point that we could actually see nuclear weapons deployed?
Yes, I don't think you can outlaw it. The only hope is Trump, um, and I'm I'm hopeful that he's going to continue. I have spoken to like RFK. I know he's against war. I was at Mar-a-Lago back in March of 2020 when he was president for dinner. And he did, that's when the first time I heard him say that he wanted to withdraw the troops from Afghanistan. And he said he was sick and tired of writing letters to their families that your son died for God and country and whatever. And he said, what are we doing there? They've been fighting over borders for 1,000 years. What difference are we going to make? That's what he said. All right. And that impressed me because it was the first head of state I ever heard worried about the people that die on the battlefield. Everybody else, oh, we're going to get them. We're going to do this, I was good friends with Maggie Thatcher too. I never heard any head of state ever say that. So that's why Trump kind of impressed me. I said, okay. And I think the distinction is that he was not a career politician. I think career politicians basically just accept that as collateral damage and don't think about it. That's all I can take from it. That Trump wasn't indoctrinated in that political arena. So he looked at it as a more of a humanity type thing. My concern is, will he maintain that? I did speak to RFK, and he did even come out. I was advocating that he join with Trump because they were both at least anti-war. And he did come out and said, Trump has convinced me that he is against war, so that's why he joined. But clearly, if Trump kept that attitude, then the only way you're going to get nuclear war is by removing Trump. And we'll have to see. But look, there's been 2 assassination attempts. Maybe the third time's a charm. I don't know. That's what they say, right? But you have to understand these neocons. I know some of them. I know Bill Kristol. His father's the one that even started the neocon movement. And I used to argue with him back in the 90s. He was saying, if we moved Saddam Hussein, Assad, and Gaddafi, we would bring peace to the Middle East. And I said, you're out of your mind. You don't understand. I don't know if you've ever been there. All Syrians don't see themselves as Syrians. They all have their own factions and groups, Sunni versus Shiite, etc. It's more or less like the English Civil Wars, Protestant versus Catholic, or you saw the same thing in Germany, Bavaria versus, Prussia. So there's certain things, yes, okay, fine, they may all be in Syria. Do they actually see themselves as Syrians? One united force. And that's just not true. You see a lot of that in your region as well. Ethnic groups, they broke up from Yugoslavia. They didn't see themselves as Yugoslavia. We have to respect that. There are different cultural things that dictate things like that. Even here in the United States, I look at California, I don't even consider it remotely close to what I would consider American. They look like a foreign land to me. I'm in Florida, so You get the same thing in Canada from the East versus West. There comes a point where nationalism disappears, and factions, arise. So with Ukraine in having that, and Biden just allowing them to use these missiles, Putin puts down a red line, they cross it. Why? They want him to attack. So they can then pretend, oh, see, he's the aggressor, not us. This is the nonsense.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Martin Armstrong. This is only part 1. Part 2 is coming in just a couple of days' time. We're going to cover the potential collapse of the EU and a whole lot more, including where he is thinking of allocating capital in today's uncertain economic environment. But until then, I'd like to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by ARC Silver Gold Osmium for all your precious metals needs. Head to arcsgo.com and contact owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And I'll see you guys for part 2 of my epic discussion with Martin Armstrong. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.